corner guy puts it under there and mixes it up, and you're supposed to choose which, you're supposed to follow which one has the bead or the coin in it, and then you win something. I'm sure you've heard of it or seen it on TV. But have you ever actually stepped up to the table and actually played it? And so you know what it's like to win. Well, you would have to, because the only people who try to play that game are people who are so accustomed to winning that they think they could figure that out. Because if you've ever played that game, then you know what it's like to go from feeling like a winner to feeling like a horse's backside. By the time it takes you to point that one wrong. It's sort of an instantaneous transformation. We can't really manage that at church, but you could find it on many street corners to go from feeling like a winner to feeling like a horse's butt. That's not the kind of transformation we're aiming for necessarily, but it is transformation. But you know why that choice is wrong? That choice is wrong because every choice is wrong. It's wrong because that game is fixed before you step up to the table. The game is rigged. Now, I hate feeling like a horse's backside. But we have allowed our politics and economics to be turned into a rigged system. Prop 123. It's a shell game. The Arizona state budget, it's a shell game. The unregulation of Wall Street is a shell game. Private prisons, it's a shell game. Voter repression is a shell game. Race in America is a shell game. Money and mainstream media in presidential politics, national politics, and local politics is a shell game. The debate over whether big or little government is better is a shell game. Education in Arizona, in Pima County, and in Tucson, in your neighborhood and on your street is a shell game. Which is to say, in each game, or in each instance, the game is fixed. The game is fixed. Vote yes on Prop 123. Or vote no. Neither vote really wins. The game is fixed. Our state budget was put together behind doors closed to even many of those within the governing party, much less to a minority party. And we emerge with a document hostile to education and lapdog-like to whoever is going to make money on the nauseatingly foolish and unnecessary border strike force. The game is fixed. The same bankers and Wall Street executives that created the fraud-based bubble that cost jobs, homes, livelihoods, and lives are not only not in prison, they are receiving bonuses as the income earned by the 1% continues to advance at the cost of the middle class. The game is fixed. Incarceration is incentivized by profit. The game is fixed. Race divides classes and is used to equip one group with inherited wealth and social adulation, while saddling other groups with barriers to generational wealth and social stigmatization. That game is fixed. Mainstream news media is no longer any column of virtue, but just another profit-driven machine of self-interest, presenting us with coverage of the political arena that is beneficial to that self-interest. In other words, the game is fixed. For years now, Arizona's per pupil spending on education ranks at or within a couple of rungs of the bottom nationally. We spend around 65% of the national average per pupil. Attempts to open public funding to private schools, means that those with mobility and stability at home can take advantage, while those without are left behind in schools increasingly strapped for resources and bereft of the ingredients needed for educational success. And of course, it's no surprise that the best schools in Arizona are in the affluent areas far from the poorest communities. And the poorest schools, of course, are in the poor communities. So in terms of both resources and socioeconomics, when it comes to education in Arizona, the game is fixed. We live in a system whose noble aspirations have been degraded to the point where the very bones of our society are rife with fraud and corruption. It's sick. Our society is ill. It's sick. Our democracy is sick. Our economic structure is sick. Our regulatory and enforcement mechanisms are sick. And I don't think we can fix it or unfix it. That is, it's going to be a multi-generational repair job. The only way out of this mess is if the generations to come are given the tools and resources to discover ways out of the garbage pile we've buried ourselves under. But you know, the priority we give to educating our children is sick. Having said all that, I think it's also important and fair to recognize that this is a really weird time. Or maybe it's that we are really weird people. We live in a time when most of us and most of the people we know, despite the sickness of our society, are doing okay. They have cars and beds and refrigerators and televisions and portable digital stuff. They are clothed and fed, and usually and not often and not for long in jail. Of course, that may speak to our privilege as much as it does to anything else. And by privilege here, I mean our access to resources due to an inherited financial or cultural predisposition or bias. But the truth is that most of the world doesn't live like that. In fact, an increasing number of Americans don't live like that. And more importantly, the ability to live like that is being corroded, and that corrosion is being institutionalized. In my view, unchecked capitalism yearns for oligarchy and plutocracy. The system itself longs to concentrate power. And that's the dark side of capitalism. It's not the whole picture, but it is part of the picture. And it is a part of the picture that must be constantly guarded against in order that the blessings of that system may flow. And we are currently in an era where that guard has been repeatedly dropped. We are currently in an era where capitalism has run rampant, where its favorite dogmas have been allowed to do what all dogmas do: that is, to discourage investigation and thus accountability, while insisting on a set of or a single inflexible truth. Where capitalism yearns to consolidate power, democracy, on the other hand, yearns to distribute power. And when in balance, they mostly check each other and foster social benefit, economic mobility, and healthy bodies and cultures, relatively healthy cultures. When they're out of balance, as we can see, these things suffer. Currently, my reading is that capitalism has overcome democracy. It's not the first time in American history when that has happened, and therein lies some hope. But for now, as plutocracy and oligarchy continue to ascend, those who benefit from their ascendancy are compelled to benefit more. And thus we see an impulse to institutionalize class. The institutionalization of class in America has taken many faces in the past, most notably racism. Today, the institutionalization of class, which is to say the institutionalization of the deprivation of resources and power to more and more people, is taking place in our schools. Our democracy will be a reflection of our educational system. If our educational system prioritizes the value of every vote, it will make sure that every vote has the intellectual wherewithal to make informed and difficult choices. It will make sure that every citizen is equipped and resourced to survive and create in the marketplace. Conversely, if you want to institutionalize a permanent underclass, then deprive the schools of resources that would equip their students to change their lot in life. Fix the game. This is how the game is fixed. To do this, you might make sure that the achievement gaps between more affluent and less privileged children widens. And in fact, today, it is wider than ever, according to the Center for Education Policy Analysis at Stanford. The children of less educated parents suffer higher obesity rates, have more social and emotional problems, and are more likely to report poor health. In Arizona, about 140,000 children are affected by mass incarceration. Other Arizona highlights are that we boast the second highest percentage of children in families where all parents are in the labor force, meaning no one's at home after school. We have the second lowest four-year graduation rate from high school. We have the second lowest percentage of children with health insurance. There are 26% of Arizona children are living in poverty. 1 out of 4 kids in our state live in poverty. Poverty, by the way, for a family of 4 is $23,000 a year. More than half of all Arizona children are living below 200% of the poverty level, which for a family of 4 is $48,000 a year for a family of 4. According to the Casey Foundation's national rankings, Arizona ranks 46th in overall child well-being. Arizona ranks 46th on measures of economic well-being, 44th in education, 44th in health, and 46th in family and community. So this is all great news if your aim is to create a permanent underclass. For health, family, and well-being are critical factors in education. In fact, economic disparity and educational disparity are impossible to separate. The correlation between education and economics is too strong to ignore. According to analysis by Bringing Up Arizona, the leader of which was here at a panel a few weeks ago, of the schools that serve well-to-do neighborhoods, 86% got A's from the state. By comparison, only 7% of the schools serving poor side of town managed to rise above their circumstances to get an A. More than 20% were totally sunk in the morass of getting D's and F's. So there's a huge correlation between economic well-being and achieving schools and economic struggle and struggling schools. By the way, in Arizona, A schools are praised and rewarded. Meanwhile, D and F schools are criticized, penalized, and eventually punished because they didn't have it hard enough. Because education and economics are so entwined, the schools cannot bust this fixed system on their own. With or without support of our tax dollars, with or without a more just budget, which we certainly need. But even with that money going to the schools, those schools need our help, because even if the schools got money, the situation around the schools hamstrings learning. For instance, in Arizona, preschool is not free, right? Therefore, only 34% of 3 to 4-year-olds participate in any type of preschool, which ranks us 49th in the nation. Meanwhile, more children are getting less attention at home. Children living in traditional married couple families dropped from 71% in 2000 to 63% in 2012. So, again, this is just to point out that there's not somebody at home after school to help kids, or not somebody who's trying to get to work before school to make sure the kids are fed. Families where all parents are in the labor force continued to rise from 60% in 2000 to 65% in 2012 and 68% last year. Because it takes two people to earn an income to support a family. It wasn't always that way. The thing is, it's all very hard for us to see. We only see it generally through statistics. We've mostly got pretty cush situations, relatively speaking. We are used to winning. That is why it is difficult to see this as a fixed game. And when we do see it as a fixed game, we think that we can win. Or we think perhaps somehow that we are already playing the same game and that we are winning. Or even that we've already won somehow. But as we are feeling a bit sorry for the fool getting swindled at the table, the dealer's partner is picking our pocket. For this game and its racket affects far more than the player and the played. That today we have an opportunity to get to work on fixing the fix. A few weeks ago, the Justice Committee of the Whole selected Justice for Youth and Families as a replacement for, or perhaps a refinement of, our justice lens of the past 2 years, which was economic disparity. And today at the congregational meeting, you will be asked and have the opportunity to endorse that lens. After the congregational meeting, you will then have the opportunity to participate in the selection of our new justice partner organizations at the follow-on Justice Committee of the Whole meeting. These shall be organizations working to help families and youth secure justice and equity in Arizona. You will have the opportunity to participate directly with those organizations, building relationships that transform lives, including yours. and transform our state. And they need our help. They need our help because the game is fixed. We need to help them because the game is fixed. And busting the fix they are in is one step toward busting the fix our nation and world is in. They need someone to go kick over the table on which the shell game is played, or help them kick it over, or to realize that we, in fact, do have skin in this game, that we are being played. We need this for our country, for our conscience, for our well-being. Because in some ways, not as individuals, but as a nation, we are them. We are all bound up together, and we know this. We already know this. After all, we are interconnected. We value equity and democracy. Or at least we say we do. Do we, though? Will we? Will you? We'll see.